At some point, we all have to deal with some very deep loss in our lives, whether it's from a bad breakup, a friend moving away, or the worst, a friend or someone you love dies. Today, I want to talk about grief, processing grief, and how to work through that broken heart. Hello, beautiful people. Grief and a broken heart. Oh my goodness, it hurts so bad and can be so overwhelming. I used to lead a grief group for about a year over at a funeral wellness center. It was a really cool place here in Lafayette, Colorado. And we would process grief through our voice. And it was a really effective way. So I'm going to talk about more of that later on in the video. What I'm going to talk about first is the number one thing that's so important when we have this broken heart, whether it's through someone dying, someone leaving, whatever it is, that broken heart, oh my gosh, it's real, right? But the number one thing you can do is have allowance for your journey through it and with it. So the first thing, no matter what I'm going to say today, your grief is unique to you, and how you process it's going to be unique. Now, I'm going to give you 4 different things here today that may really help, that you might want to try. And by all means, give it a try, but also know that allowance for your particular pattern of how grief flows and your journey through it is most important. So let's dive in. So one of the biggest things that you can do with grief is to ask if it is all yours. Now, I have a personal experience with this just recently. So it's gonna give a really good example of what I'm talking about. But basically, when you're grieving, you can also be courting into a lot of people who are grieving, and you will be exacerbating that grief of yours through being empathically connected to someone else's who are grieving the same thing. Let me tell you what happened to me. So a friend of mine passed from high school, and this friend had about 5 other friends who they were this really tight knit of friends. They were all best friends. You can imagine suddenly when this woman died recently, she wasn't even 50, that everyone got extremely grief-stricken. And I was in shock, and I started to reach out to everybody and really saying I was sorry and holding their hearts and sending light and love. And throughout the day, my grief started escalating to the point where I got super overwhelmed. And I hadn't seen this woman probably 20 years. I saw her last at a friend's wedding. So I knew that this grief wasn't like totally all mine. And by the time dinner came, I couldn't even pull myself together. I was a wreck. And I had to just sit down with myself and really ask, how much of this is mine? Because all day I was tuning into people who had extreme grief around this death. And so what happened was I sat in there and I realized that I was courting, and I started to see actually energetic cords to all the different people that I was connecting with throughout the day around this person's passing. And I could see that just this cord of energetic was going from one person to me, and there was a lot of them, and I was siphoning their grief, and it was becoming too much for me to handle. So I had to just cut the cords and just send that energy back to them with consciousness and love. But the thing is, guys, when we're corded to someone, it doesn't help them grieve any less. It's just we actually get the huge energetic of their grief. Us processing it doesn't necessarily help them with their grief. So if we can be a very clear energy and cut those cords and send the grief energy back, or you can even send it up, we get to be kind of like the steadfast. We get to be the lighthouse, if you will, as other people are grieving. And so it's really important to know where your baseline is. What is your grief and what is someone else's that you're holding for them? So once you know that, then you know what you're working with your own grief. And that's what we're going to talk about next. Okay, so we're going to talk about next is using the voice to process grief. But first, I want to let you know, I'm going to give you a little bonus tip at the end of the video that I just used this morning that worked impeccably to find my inner peace again. So stay tuned for that. So remember earlier in the video, I talked about running a grief processing group for the past year. And this is what we did. It's a vulnerable work, but it is profound. And every time I had a group of people come to sit in a circle with me to sing their grief, they started very vulnerable and unsure and grief-stricken. And by the end of the circle, within 1 hour, they were able to process their grief to a point where they were joyful and smiling and grateful for the experience. So how do we do this? Well, what you do is there's 2 ways to use the voice with grief. One is kind of like a Celtic tradition. You can look up the word keening. This is where people would go to a funeral service and they would keen. They would do these wails. And their job was to move the grief in the room and get people moving their energy of grief, whether it was through voice or sobs or crying, right? And so keening is a way to do that. And it's just a wail that you can just do to just move the energy of grief. And that's really what the voice can do. And the second way is to tune into your grief and tune into a part of the body where you feel the grief the most. For a lot of people, it's the heart. It's that broken heart, right? Losing someone so dear to us, right? So tune into your heart space. And then from there, we just start to get to know the grief energy there. You just start to feel it. Say, I'm here. You just be with it, be present with it. And by that presence, then you get to feel it. You feel it kind of move. You feel the heaviness of it, the depth of it, the hollowness of it, the fear that's there. And you just start sensing and feeling. And from there, you just give it a voice with your voice. You might start to just groan. You might just start to hum. And all of a sudden, it may start going into just toning. And all of a sudden, you may have this like a kind of song that starts to come through. A song, I just mean sounds. Okay? So give that a try. Tune into your heart. And then just see where the voice wants to go. Now, the next video I'm going to upload, I'm going to give an example of this, of toning to process grief. Now, in these grief circles that I did, I would actually start the process of the toning for people. And I would feel into the grief of the collective group, and I would just start toning. And then I would ask the others to come in with their sound. And it kind of helped get things moving. So that's what I'll do on my next video. And that may help you to learn how to use your voice with moving the grief. Okay, now a lot of times people don't want to move grief because it's almost like by grieving, they're remembering. They don't want to let go of that person that they lost. And that's one way. And a lot of people do hold on to grief because that means that they're still holding on to the person on some way. But there's another way. There's other ways to hold on and remember and to have a different relationship with the person that passed or with the person that's left. You can have a different relationship. It's not of the physical like this, but you can transform your relationship into just a different way and still have your joy intact. So it's your choice. You can hold on to grief as a way of remembering and holding on to that person, or you can start to move the energy, let it go, and be willing to have a different type of relationship with the person that's passed. All right, the next thing I want to say about moving grief is movement, okay? Just any kind of movement. You do not have to be a good dancer. But when you feel grief, just start undulating, right? You can just start undulating the spine, moving the heart space, okay? Just moving the neck a little bit, just shaking it out, right? So undulating back and forth, shaking, just jumping up and down. I remember when my father passed 5 years ago, I would do a lot of jumping. That just felt really good to me. So move that energy of grief. Let it kind of just move through you and move your body. And it does not have to look a certain way. You can just move your body like a robot or just shake it. It doesn't have to be a good dance. But dancing and movement is so powerful to move this grief, which brings me to this fourth piece is just grief. It comes in waves. What I've noticed is it comes in these huge waves. And I remember when I was really grief-stricken with my dad's passing, that I was really scared to feel that wave. I almost like just shoved it down for a little while until finally I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go here. I'm just going to see what happens. And I was scared that if I went there, that I would be grief-stricken and just saw a sobbing mess all day long. And the thing is, at the time, I had 2 younger kids and I had to go to work and I had to perform. I'm a singer for a living. So, you know, when you're grief and you're crying, it's really hard to sing. So I was just like, I can't go here. But one day I did. And when that wave came, I allowed it. And what happened was I just went full throttle on it. I did the singing, I did the movement, I jumped, I just moved it. And literally within 10 to 15 minutes, it all subsided. I actually felt joyful. I felt like myself again. It's kind of crazy. And so then I started to just follow those waves and allow them to come through. And when they came through, I would just give my total presence to it. I would give my voice and my body to it, and I would just move and sing. And that really helped me move the energy of grief. It was really profound. So I really encourage you to try this movement. Okay, so, you know, broken hearts, we tend to focus on this area of the body. Some people call it the 4th chakra, the heart center, the ethereal heart. The emotional center. Here we are, right here, the heart. Now you really want to get that space moving so you can kind of roll the shoulders in and then push the chest out. Roll it in, push the chest out. Contract and expand. That will help move that area. Sometimes we just get very held up in this heart area when we have a broken heart and we've experienced deep loss. Get this part moving, okay? Also, this back area can get really tight when we're dealing with intense loss and emotion. So one of the things you can do is just wrap your hands around like this. You're making X, and then you're swiveling your hands. And then you just take a deep breath into that upper back. And release some of the tension, emotional tension in that back. All right, so guys, I hope this was helpful. Just to recap, and then I'm going to get to the bonus that's going to help you feel so much better. So number 1, be an allowance of your journey. Everyone's grief journey is going to be different. Number 2 is just let your voice be the voice of your grief. Let it move the energy of your grief, right? Number 3 is dance. Move your body. Move the energy of that deep emotion out of your body and through. And number 4 is know that it comes in waves, and that if that intense tsunami comes, allow it. Give it all of your attention. And you may notice that it doesn't take up your whole day, that you're able to deal with the grief in these smaller waves and then have joy in your day in between the waves that come through. Now, I promised you this last piece that really helped me today. And this may seem kind of simplistic, and I hope it doesn't seem callous to you, but it works so well. I have to share this. So basically, when we are completely brokenhearted and grief-stricken, somehow we have this person in our lives. We've kind of courted to them. We've made them somehow a part of our purpose of living, right? And somehow we've lost ourselves. When we give ourselves to a relationship that much, we tend to lose perspective of what we really are. And when that person does leave the planet physically, we feel lost. We don't know who we are anymore. You know, maybe we had a certain role with that person. They fed a certain part of our dream or our lives. And what do we do? So I have a song I'm going to be playing in a few days that I wrote when my dad died. And I'm going to explain all about that. And this will be 2 videos from now. So tune into that, about how we dream together with people, and when we lose them, we feel a little lost, like our dream is gone. Like, what's the point of going on, kind of thing. So tune into that 2 videos down. That'll be happening on Sunday. When we lose that part of ourselves, it's really important to get back in here and remember who we really are. And the way I do that is just one hand on top of the other and tune in to my source self. Maybe you call it your God self, but we all have that spark of divine source, God, right in here, and come back to ourselves. And it's almost like self-soothing, because there we are, and we've been out here so long, grieving this loss of this person, not knowing how we're going to survive with this person and without them in our lives. And when we come back to the source or God self of ourselves, there's a peace there. There is this sense of, oh, all is well. All is working out. And if we sit with that stillness of our source self long enough, we really marinate, and that peace grows, and the acceptance of the situation grows. And it's a really beautiful space of being that will give you relief from this intense grief. So remembering who you really are, that source and divine nature, and knowing that the person who has passed has their divine path as well. And so you can tune in to them when you are in this divine space. You can't tune into them when you're grief-stricken and having these low frequency emotions. It's not bad to have grief. We're going to have our journey. But if you would like to have a different relationship with the person that has passed, we need to get into a different vibration of being for them to be able to match with us, to see us, to hear us, to commune with us. So getting into that God space and that sense of peace, and then you ask the question, what does our relationship look like now? How can I still have you in my life? And you start living those questions, and you'll sense that they're right here with you. You'll sense that you can talk to them. They're right here. This happened with my dad. And for a while, when I was in some heavy grief, I couldn't feel him. I could not feel him anywhere. I couldn't hear them. And then when I really started to work with the grief and just find my sense of peace again, there he was. He'd visit me at dinner when I was making dinner. He'd visit me when I was on my walks. I'd hear the voice of him, hey, Beck. And it was pretty amazing. There is a way to continue your relationship with a loved one who has passed over out of the physical realm. They're still here. Their soul is still here. Their energetic is still here. But the most important piece is to move that energy and find that nature, that true nature of your peace and your God spark. So beautiful, people. I hope this was helpful. Let me know in the comments if this is all making sense. And let me know if you have any questions about anything I shared. And I hope you'll tune in to the next video in a few days. I'll lead you through the whole vocal exercise to move grief. Okay? So be well, be gentle with yourself, and thank you so much for getting to the end and tuning in here. Namaste.